The blood on Lily Ashford's hands belonged to a man who had tried to steal her father's last horse. And as she stood there in the dusty street of Fort Kearny, Nebraska, in the spring of 1873, watching the thief ride away wounded but alive, she did not notice the tall cowboy with eyes like storm clouds who had just witnessed her shoot with the precision of a trained marksman. Zachary Owens had been riding through Fort Kearny on his way to deliver a herd of cattle to the railroad depot when he saw the entire confrontation unfold. The young woman could not have been more than 22, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and a dress that had seen better days, patched at the elbows and hem. She held her father's old rifle with the confidence of someone who had been shooting since childhood, and when she finally lowered the weapon, her hands trembled just slightly. Zachary dismounted from his horse and approached her slowly, keeping his hands visible so she would not think him another threat. "That was some fine shooting, miss," he said, his voice low and respectful. "You all right?" Lily turned to face him, and Zachary felt something shift in his chest at the sight of her green eyes, bright with unshed tears and fierce determination. "I am fine, thank you. The horse is all we have left since my father passed 3 weeks ago. I could not let that man take it." "Your father passed recently." Zachary removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "I am sorry for your loss, miss. That is a heavy burden to carry alone." "Lily Ashford," she said, not offering her hand because she was still holding the rifle, "and I am managing well enough on my own." There was a defensive edge to her voice that told Zachary she had been hearing plenty of opinions about what a young, unmarried woman should or should not be doing in the weeks since her father's death. Fort Kearny was a town that had grown up around the old army fort, and while it had seen its share of independent women, there were still plenty of folks who thought a woman alone was either a scandal or an opportunity. "Zachary Owens," he introduced himself, placing his hat back on his head. "I am just passing through with a cattle drive, but if you need any help securing your property or anything else, I would be happy to lend a hand before I move on." Lily's expression softened slightly, though she still maintained her guard. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Owens, but as I said, I am managing. Good day to you." She turned and walked back toward a small house at the edge of town, her spine straight and her head held high despite the weight of grief and responsibility she clearly carried. Zachary watched her go, admiring her strength even as he worried about her situation. Fort Kearny was not the lawless frontier it had been 20 years ago, but it was still rough enough that a woman alone could face serious trouble. Over the next 2 weeks, Zachary found reasons to stay in Fort Kearny. He told himself it was because the cattle needed rest before the final push to the depot, or because his men deserved a few days of leisure in town. But the truth was he could not stop thinking about Lily Ashford and her fierce independence. He saw her around town often, always busy with some task or errand, always polite but distant with the men who tried to court her or offer help. She worked at the general store 3 days a week to earn money, and she took in mending and laundry to make ends meet. Her father had left her the house and the horse, but little else in the way of money or resources. Zachary made a point of shopping at the general store on the days Lily worked there. He bought supplies he did not really need and made conversation about the weather, the town, and anything else he could think of that might make her smile. Slowly, over those 2 weeks, he learned more about her. Her father had been a surveyor for the railroad before an accident left him unable to work. Her mother had died when Lily was just 12, and she had been caring for her father ever since. She had taught herself to shoot, to manage accounts, to do all the practical things a woman needed to know to survive in Nebraska in 1873. "You are still in town, Mr. Owens," Lily observed one afternoon as Zachary came into the store for the third time that week. "I thought cattle drivers were always in a hurry to reach their destination. We finished our business at the depot," Zachary admitted, leaning against the counter. "But I find Fort Kearny has more to offer than I first thought." Lily looked up from the ledger she was writing in, and for a moment their eyes met. Zachary saw a flicker of something in her expression, not quite interest but not quite rejection either. "And what exactly does Fort Kearny have to offer a cowboy like you?" "Good people," Zachary said simply. "Honest folk trying to make a life in hard country. That is worth staying for." "Is it?" Lily's tone was skeptical. "Or are you staying because you think I need rescuing, Mr. Owens? Because I have had quite enough of men who think a woman alone must be desperate for a husband." The words stung, but Zachary could hear the exhaustion behind them. "I do not think you need rescuing, Miss Ashford. I think you are one of the strongest people I have met. But I also think that everyone needs someone they can rely on, man or woman. And I would like to be someone you can rely on if you will let me." Lily set down her pen and studied him carefully. "Why? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "Because from the moment I saw you standing in that street, defending what was yours with everything you had, I knew you were someone special," Zachary said, his voice steady and sincere. "And because I would like the chance to know you better, if you will give it to me." For a long moment, Lily said nothing. Then she picked up her pen again and returned to her ledger. "You can walk me home after my shift ends if you like, but do not expect anything more than conversation, Mr. Owens." That first walk home became a regular occurrence. Every day that Lily worked at the store, Zachary would appear just as she was finishing and offer to walk her back to her small house at the edge of town. They talked about everything during those walks. Lily told him about her childhood, about learning to read from her mother's old books, and learning to survive from her father's practical wisdom. Zachary shared stories of growing up on a ranch in Colorado, of learning to work with cattle and horses, of the satisfaction of honest work under open skies. As spring turned to early summer, their friendship deepened into something more. Zachary found himself looking for excuses to stay in Fort Kearny, taking on work at nearby ranches and farms so he would have a reason to remain close. Lily began to look forward to their walks, to the sound of his voice and the steadiness of his presence. He never pushed her for more than she was willing to give, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his time and attention. One evening in late June, as they sat on the steps of her small porch watching the sunset paint the Nebraska sky in shades of gold and crimson, Zachary reached over and took her hand. Lily stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed and let her fingers curl around his. "I care about you, Lily," Zachary said quietly. "More than I have ever cared about anyone. I know it has only been a few months, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Lily turned to look at him, her green eyes reflecting the last light of day. "I care about you too, Zachary. But caring and building a life together are two different things." "I know that," Zachary said, "but I want to build that life with you if you will have me." He stood up and moved to kneel on the step below her, still holding her hand. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple gold ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Lily Ashford, will you marry me?" The words hung in the air between them, full of hope and promise. But Lily's expression shifted, and Zachary saw fear flash across her face. She pulled her hand away gently and stood up, putting distance between them. "I cannot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry, Zachary, but I cannot marry you." "Why not?" Zachary asked, rising to his feet but not moving closer. "If you care about me and I care about you, why can we not make a life together?" "Because I have spent my entire adult life caring for someone else," Lily said, her voice growing stronger with emotion. "My mother died and I cared for my father. I gave up any chance of a normal youth, of friends and parties and all the things other girls had because he needed me. And I did it gladly because I loved him. But now he is gone, and for the first time in my life, I have a choice about what I do and where I go. I am not ready to give that up, even for someone as good as you." Zachary felt like he had been kicked in the chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Marriage does not have to mean giving up your choices, Lily. It can mean having a partner who supports them." "Can it?" Lily's laugh was bitter. "Every married woman I know lives by her husband's decisions. Where they live, how they spend their money, what they do with their time. That is the reality of marriage, Zachary, no matter how much you might wish it otherwise." "It does not have to be that way for us," Zachary insisted. "Maybe not at first," Lily said sadly. "But eventually it would be, because that is what marriage is. And I am not ready for that. I may never be ready for that." She went inside and closed the door, leaving Zachary standing on her porch with the ring still in his hand and his heart breaking in his chest. The next morning, Zachary almost left Fort Kearney. He saddled his horse and packed his gear, telling himself that there was no point in staying where he was not wanted. But as he rode to the edge of town, something made him stop. He thought about Lily's words, about her fear of losing herself in marriage, and he realized that leaving would only confirm her belief that men gave up when things got difficult. If he truly cared about her, he needed to respect her decision and prove that his feelings were not conditional on getting what he wanted. He turned his horse around and rode back into town, finding work at a ranch about 10 miles outside Fort Kearney. The work was hard and the pay was decent, and it gave him a reason to stay without crowding Lily or making her uncomfortable. He still saw her around town occasionally, and they were polite to each other, but the easy warmth of their friendship had been strained by his proposal and her rejection. Summer passed into autumn, and Zachary settled into his new life in Nebraska. He made friends among the ranch hands and the townspeople, earning a reputation as a reliable worker and a decent man. He did not pursue Lily, but he made sure she knew he was still around if she needed anything. When a storm damaged part of her roof in September, he showed up with tools and supplies and fixed it without asking for permission or payment. When her horse went lame in October, he brought her a young mare from the ranch, saying the animal needed gentling, and he thought Lily might be willing to work with her in exchange for keeping her. Lily accepted these gestures with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. She could see that Zachary was respecting her boundaries while still showing he cared, and it confused her. Every other man who had expressed interest in her had either pushed too hard or given up entirely when she said no. Zachary was different. He was patient in a way that made her feel valued rather than pressured, and it scared her how much she missed their evening talks and his steady presence. In November, as the first snows began to fall across the Nebraska plains, Lily found herself thinking more and more about Zachary. She saw him at church on Sundays, always sitting in the back row, always tipping his hat to her with a small smile that made her heart ache. She heard the other townswomen talk about what a good husband he would make, how lucky some woman would be to catch his eye. And she felt a stab of something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy when she saw him talking to Mary Peterson, the pretty daughter of the livery owner. One cold evening in late November, there was a knock on Lily's door. She opened it to find Zachary standing there with a deer slung over his shoulder and a hopeful expression on his face. "I had a successful hunt today," he said, "and I thought you might be able to use some meat for the winter. I can help you butcher and preserve it if you like." Lily should have said no. She should have maintained the distance she had been trying to create between them. But it was cold, and her supplies were running low, and she was tired of being alone. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "I appreciate the thought." They worked together in her small kitchen, cutting and salting the meat, talking quietly about inconsequential things. It felt natural and comfortable, like slipping into an old routine, and Lily realized how much she had missed this. When the work was done and the meat was packed away, Zachary washed his hands and prepared to leave. "Thank you for your help," Lily said. "And for the deer. That was very kind." "It was my pleasure," Zachary said. He paused at the door, then turned back to her. "Lily, I want you to know that I respect your decision from this summer. I am not trying to pressure you or change your mind, but I also want you to know that my feelings have not changed. I still care about you, and I still want to build a life with you, whenever and however you might be ready for that, if you are ever ready for that." Before Lily could respond, he pulled the gold ring from his pocket. "Lily Ashford, will you marry me?" The question caught her completely off guard. "Zachary, I told you, I know what you told me," he said gently. "And I heard you. But I am asking again because I want you to know that I have not given up. You do not have to answer right now. Just think about it." "No," Lily said, her voice firm despite the tears suddenly filling her eyes. "My answer is no, Zachary. I am sorry, but it has not changed." The pain that crossed Zachary's face nearly broke her resolve, but Lily held firm. She watched him put the ring back in his pocket, saw him nod once in acceptance, and then he was gone, walking out into the cold November night. Winter settled over Fort Kearny with a vengeance. The snows came heavy and frequent, and the temperatures dropped so low that water froze in buckets overnight. Lily spent most of her time indoors, working on her mending and laundry, trying to keep her small house warm and her spirits up. She saw Zachary less frequently during those cold months, though she knew he was still working at the ranch. Sometimes she would wake in the morning to find her front path cleared of snow, or firewood stacked on her porch, and she knew it was him even though he never left a note or asked for acknowledgement. Christmas came and went quietly. Lily attended the church service on Christmas Eve and saw Zachary sitting with some of the ranch hands. He smiled at her, but they did not speak. On Christmas morning, she found a package on her porch. Inside was a warm wool shawl in a deep green that matched her eyes, and a note in Zachary's handwriting that simply said, "Stay warm." Lily wrapped the shawl around her shoulders and cried, because she was beginning to realize that she was pushing away the best thing that had ever happened to her, and she did not know how to stop being afraid. The winter seemed to last forever, but eventually the snows began to melt and the first hints of spring appeared across the prairie. In late March, Lily was working in her small garden, trying to prepare the soil for planting, when Zachary rode up on his horse. He dismounted and approached her slowly, giving her time to tell him to leave if she wanted. "I am heading out tomorrow," he said without preamble. "There is a cattle drive heading up to Montana, and they need experienced hands. I will be gone for several months, maybe longer." Something cold and sharp twisted in Lily's chest. "I see. Well, I hope you have a safe journey." "Before I go, I need to ask you something," Zachary said. He pulled out that gold ring again, and Lily felt her breath catch. "Lily Ashford, will you marry me? Come with me to Montana, or let me come back to you here in Fort Kearny. I do not care where we are as long as we are together." Lily stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands. She looked at Zachary, at his honest face and his hopeful eyes, and she felt the walls she had built around her heart tremble, but the fear was still stronger than the hope. "No, Zachary, I cannot." "Why not?" His voice was not angry, just tired and sad. "What are you so afraid of, Lily?" "I am afraid of losing myself," she said, the words rushing out like water through a broken dam. I am afraid of becoming someone's wife and forgetting how to be Lily. I am afraid that I will wake up one day and not recognize my own life because I have bent and shaped myself to fit someone else's expectations. And I am afraid that even if you mean well now, eventually you will want me to be something I am not, and I will disappoint you. Zachary was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and took her dirty hands in his, holding them gently. I cannot promise you that marriage will be easy, or that we will never disagree, or that you will never have moments of doubt. But I can promise you that I will never ask you to be anything other than who you are. The woman I fell in love with is strong and independent and fierce, and I do not want to change any of that. I want to be your partner, Lily, not your master. And I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to believe that. He pressed the ring into her palm and closed her fingers around it. Keep this. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. And if you do not, then at least you will know that someone believed you were worth waiting for. He mounted his horse and rode away, and Lily stood in her garden clutching the ring and watching him disappear down the road. She felt like she had just made a terrible mistake, but she still did not know how to make herself say yes. The months that followed were the loneliest of Lily's life. She went through the motions of her daily routine, working at the store, tending her garden, taking in laundry and mending. But everything felt hollow and gray without Zachary's presence. She found herself looking for him in town, forgetting for a moment that he was gone, and the disappointment when she remembered was like a physical ache. The other townswomen noticed her melancholy and offered sympathy and advice. Some told her she was foolish to have turned down such a good man. Others said she was wise to protect her independence. But none of them understood the real struggle happening inside her, the battle between what she wanted and what she feared. Summer arrived hot and dry, and Lily threw herself into her work. She took on more hours at the store, expanded her garden, and volunteered to help at the school. Anything to keep busy, to keep from thinking about Zachary riding across Montana, perhaps meeting someone else, someone braver and less broken than she was. In July, a letter arrived. Lily recognized Zachary's handwriting on the envelope, and her hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Lily," he wrote, "I hope this letter finds you well. Montana is beautiful in the summer, all mountains and rivers and sky that goes on forever. The work is hard but good, and the pay is better than I expected. I have been thinking about what you said, about losing yourself in marriage, and I want you to know that I understand your fear better now. I have seen men out here who treat their wives like property, and I do not blame you for not wanting that life. But I have also seen partnerships, real ones, where both people make each other stronger. That is what I want for us, if you will ever give me the chance. I am not writing to pressure you. I just wanted you to know that I am thinking of you, and I am still waiting. With love, Zachary." Lily read the letter so many times that the paper became soft and worn at the creases. She carried it with her everywhere, pulling it out to read again when she felt the loneliness becoming too heavy. She started writing responses in her head, conversations they might have if he were here, arguments and agreements and all the small daily exchanges that made up a life shared with another person. In late August, she finally sat down and wrote him a letter back. She told him about her garden, about the new books that had arrived at the store, about the ordinary details of her days. She did not mention his proposal or her feelings, because she still did not have answers to those questions. But she signed the letter with affection, Lily, and hoped he would understand what she was trying to say. His response came in September, full of stories about the cattle drive and the men he worked with. He wrote about seeing a grizzly bear from a safe distance, about sleeping under the stars, about the particular quality of silence on the open range. He made her laugh with his descriptions of the cook's terrible coffee and the young cowhand who kept getting thrown from his horse. And he ended the letter with "Missing you always, Zachary." They continued to write through the autumn months, their letters becoming longer and more personal as the weeks passed. Zachary told her about his childhood, about losing his mother to fever when he was 15, and having to grow up fast to help his father keep the ranch running. Lily shared her own memories, the good ones and the painful ones, letting him see parts of herself she had never shown anyone. In October, Zachary's letters mentioned that he would be heading back to Nebraska soon. The cattle had been delivered, and he had earned enough money to buy some land of his own if he wanted. "I am trying to decide whether to stay in Montana or come back to Fort Kearney," he wrote. "Montana has opportunities, but Nebraska has you. I know what my heart wants, but I do not want to make you uncomfortable by returning if you would rather I stayed away. Please be honest with me, Lily. Do you want me to come back?" Lily sat at her small kitchen table and stared at that question for hours. Did she want him to come back? The answer was yes, desperately yes, but admitting that felt like admitting so much more. It felt like admitting she had been wrong, that she had let fear control her for too long, that she had pushed away something precious because she was too scared to take a risk. She picked up her pen and wrote, "Yes, Zachary, please come back. I cannot promise you anything, but I miss you more than I thought possible, and I would like to see you again. Lily." 3 weeks later, on a cold November morning very much like the day he had left, Zachary rode back into Fort Kearney. Lily was working at the store when she heard the news, and she ran outside without even stopping to remove her apron. She saw him on his horse at the far end of the street, saw him see her, saw him dismount and start walking toward her. They met in the middle of the dusty street, the same spot where they had first encountered each other 18 months before. For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other, taking in the changes the months had brought. Zachary had more sun lines around his eyes and his shoulders seemed broader from the hard work. Lily had let her hair grow longer, and there was a softness to her expression that had not been there before. "You came back," Lily said, her voice breaking slightly. "I said I would," Zachary replied. "I told you I would wait. I know. But I did not really believe it. Men do not usually keep promises like that." "I am not most men," Zachary said simply, "and you are not a promise I would ever want to break." They stood there in the street, aware of the townspeople watching them, aware that this moment was going to become part of Fort Kearney's local gossip for years to come. Lily did not care. She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around Zachary, hugging him with all the strength and desperation and relief she had been holding inside for months. Zachary held her just as tightly, his face buried in her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "I missed you," he murmured. "Every single day I missed you." "I missed you too," Lily whispered. "I was so stupid, Zachary. I was so afraid and I pushed you away and I am so sorry." "You were not stupid," Zachary said, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "You were protecting yourself." "I understand that, but I am hoping you might be ready to stop protecting yourself quite so hard and let me in." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think I am. I think I finally am." They walked back to Lily's house, hand in hand, ignoring the smiles and whispers following them down the street. Once inside, they sat at her kitchen table and talked for hours, catching up on all the things that letters could not convey. Zachary told her about his plans to use his savings to buy a small ranch outside Fort Kearney, about his dreams of building something lasting. Lily told him about her realization over the summer that independence did not mean isolation, that she could be strong and still need someone. As the afternoon faded into evening, Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. "I want to ask you something, but I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" Lily asked. "Afraid that you will say no again, and I do not know if my heart can take another no from you," Zachary admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Lily squeezed his hand. "There is only one way to find out." Zachary took a deep breath and stood up, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. He pulled out that gold ring, the same one he had offered her 3 times before, the one she had been carrying in her pocket since the day he left. "Lily Ashford, I love you. I have loved you since the first day I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die. I am asking you one more time, and if you say no, I will respect that. But I am hoping, praying that maybe this time you will say yes. Will you marry me?" Lily looked down at him, at his dear face and his hopeful eyes, and she felt all the fear and doubt that had controlled her for so long finally release its grip. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and sure. "Yes, Zachary, I will marry you." For a moment, Zachary just stared at her as if he could not quite believe what he had heard. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise, and he was pulling her down to him, kissing her with all the love and longing and relief of 18 months of waiting. Lily kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, her heart finally opening to let him all the way in. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Zachary slipped the ring onto Lily's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been meant for her all along. "I cannot believe you said yes," he said, wonder in his voice. "I was so sure I would have to wait another year." "I would not have made you wait another year," Lily said, touching his face gently. "I think I knew when you left that I loved you. It just took me these months to accept it, and to believe that loving you did not mean losing myself." "You will never lose yourself," Zachary promised. "I will make sure of it." They were married in the Fort Kearney church on a bright December morning, just a few weeks before Christmas. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with most of the town turning out to witness the union of the stubborn seamstress and the patient cowboy who had waited her out. Lily wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Zachary had somehow managed to find despite the season. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Zachary kissed her in front of everyone, Lily felt a completeness she had never experienced before. They spent their first weeks of marriage in Lily's small house, making plans for their future. Zachary had indeed found a piece of land about 5 miles outside town, with good grazing and a creek running through it. It would take time and work to build it into a proper ranch, but they had time now, and they would do the work together. "What do you want our life to look like?" Zachary asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "Really, truly, what do you want?" Lily thought about it carefully. "I want to build something that is ours, not mine or yours, but ours. I want to work beside you to make decisions together, to know that my voice matters as much as yours. I want children eventually, but not right away. I want time with just you first, time to learn how to be married before we add more people to our family. And I want to keep working at the store if I can, at least for a while, because I like having my own money and my own purpose beyond the house." "That all sounds perfect to me," Zachary said, pulling her close. "Though I have to admit the part about children has me excited. I cannot wait to see what a child of ours would look like." "Probably stubborn as a mule with both of us as parents," Lily laughed. "Definitely," Zachary agreed. "But loved beyond measure." They moved out to the ranch in early spring of 1875. The house Zachary had built over the winter was small but sturdy, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun and a porch where they could sit in the evenings. Lily helped plant the first crops and fence the first pasture. She learned to work with cattle, discovering that she had a natural gift for reading the animals and predicting their behavior. Zachary learned from her too, watching how she organized their accounts and managed their supplies with an efficiency he had never mastered. Their partnership was not always easy. They had disagreements about money and priorities, about when to expand and when to hold steady. But they had promised to hear each other out, to make decisions together, and they kept that promise even when it was difficult. Lily discovered that sharing her life with someone did not mean losing herself. Instead, it meant becoming a fuller version of herself, with someone who saw all of her and loved her anyway. In the summer of 1876, Lily realized she was pregnant. She had known it was likely to happen eventually, but the reality still filled her with a complex mix of joy and fear. She told Zachary one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "You are sure?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation," Lily said. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Zachary pulled her into his arms. "Lily, I am thrilled. Scared out of my mind, but thrilled." "I am scared too," Lily admitted. "My mother died when I was young, and I do not have anyone to teach me how to do this." "We will figure it out together," Zachary said firmly. "Just like we figure everything out together." The pregnancy was not easy. Lily was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. She hated feeling weak and dependent, hated having to let Zachary do more of the physical work around the ranch. But Zachary was patient and gentle, never complaining, always finding ways to help her feel useful even when she was confined to the house. As her belly grew round with their child, Lily found herself marveling at the changes in her body and her life. She had been so afraid of this, of being tied down by motherhood, of losing her identity to this new role. But instead, she felt like she was adding something new to who she was, not replacing what had been there before. Their son was born on a cold February night in 1877, arriving in a rush after a labor that lasted only 6 hours. Zachary was there for all of it, holding Lily's hand and wiping her forehead, refusing to leave even when the midwife suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. When the baby finally emerged, red-faced and screaming, Zachary cut the cord with shaking hands and then sat beside Lily, tears streaming down his face. "We have a son," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Lily, we have a son." They named him James Elijah Owens, after both their fathers. He was a healthy, hungry baby who seemed to cry more than he slept those first few weeks. Lily was exhausted and overwhelmed, but every time she looked at her son's face or watched Zachary cradle him with such tenderness, she felt a fierce joy that made all the difficulty worthwhile. The first year of motherhood was the hardest thing Lily had ever done. She was tired all the time, covered in spit-up and worse, struggling to keep up with the demands of an infant while also trying to maintain some semblance of her former life. There were days when she cried from frustration, days when she snapped at Zachary over nothing, days when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But Zachary never wavered. He got up with the baby at night so Lily could sleep. He took James for long walks so Lily could have time to herself. He hired a neighbor girl to help with the housework so Lily could continue managing the ranch accounts. He kept his promise to be a partner, even when it would have been easier to fall into traditional roles. As James grew from an infant into a toddler, life on the ranch found a new rhythm. Lily discovered that she could be both a mother and herself, that the two identities could coexist and even enhance each other. She taught James to read early, just as her mother had taught her. Zachary taught him to ride, sitting him on the gentlest horse and leading him around the corral. Together, they showed him how to work hard and love fiercely. In the spring of 1880, Lily found out she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with pure joy and very little fear. She knew what to expect now, knew that she could handle the challenges ahead. Their daughter, Catherine Rose Owens, was born that November, an easier delivery than James had been. She was a quiet baby, so different from her brother, with Lily's green eyes and Zachary's dark hair. The ranch prospered over the years. Zachary's careful management and Lily's sharp business sense proved to be an unbeatable combination. They expanded their herd, bought more land, and became known throughout the region for their quality cattle and their fair dealings. Other ranchers came to them for advice, and more than one young couple looked to them as an example of what a partnership in marriage could look like. In 1882, when James was 5 and Catherine was 2, Lily finally sold her father's old house in town and used the money to build an addition onto their ranch house. The new rooms included a proper office where she could manage the accounts and a library where she could house the growing collection of books they had accumulated. It felt like a final letting go of her old life and a full embrace of the new one she had built. One evening that summer, after the children were asleep, Zachary and Lily sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Nebraska sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson. Zachary reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become so natural over the years that Lily barely noticed it anymore. "You remember that day in Fort Kearney when I first asked you to marry me?" Zachary asked. "Of course," Lily said. "I remember all 3 times you asked before I finally said yes." "You ever regret making me wait so long?" Zachary asked. "Do you wish you had said yes that first time?" Lily thought about it seriously. "No," she said finally. "I think I needed that time to understand what I wanted and what I was afraid of. If I had said yes that first time, I would have spent years second-guessing myself, wondering if I had given up too much. But because you waited, because you proved that you meant what you said about being partners, I was able to say yes with my whole heart." "It was the hardest thing I have ever done," Zachary admitted. "Waiting for you, not knowing if you would ever say yes. There were times I thought about giving up, about moving to Montana and trying to forget about you." "Why did you not?" Lily asked. "Because every time I thought about leaving, I would remember you standing in that street with your father's rifle, fierce and strong and absolutely certain of what you were defending. And I knew that you were worth waiting for, even if the wait lasted forever." Lily squeezed his hand. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for being patient when I was scared. Thank you for proving that I could have both the life I wanted and the love I needed. Thank you for finally saying yes," Zachary said with a smile, "even if it did take 4 tries." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear James stirring in his sleep and Catherine making soft baby sounds. This was their life now, full and rich and sometimes chaotic, nothing like what either of them had imagined when they first met, but better than anything they could have planned. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. James grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books and animals in equal measure. Catherine became a bright, adventurous girl who was always getting into scrapes and asking questions faster than her parents could answer them. In 1885, Lily gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Sarah, who kept the entire household on their toes with their energy and mischief. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Zachary's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher spread throughout Nebraska, and he was eventually elected to serve on the Territorial Livestock Association. Lily took over more and more of the business management, becoming known in her own right as a shrewd negotiator and a sharp judge of market conditions. Together, they built something that neither could have achieved alone. In 1889, when they had been married for 14 years, a young cowhand came to the ranch looking for work. He was nervous and earnest, with dreams of saving enough money to start his own spread someday. Zachary hired him on the spot, seeing something of his younger self in the boy's determination. That evening, Lily teased Zachary about hiring another hand when they already had a full crew. "You saw yourself in him," she said with a knowing smile. "Maybe," Zachary admitted. "Or maybe I saw a young man who deserves a chance, the way I got a chance when I needed one." "You are a good man, Zachary Owens," Lily said, kissing him softly. "Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not today," Zachary said, "but I never get tired of hearing it." They made love that night with the ease and familiarity of longtime partners who still desired each other, still found joy in the connection they shared. Afterward, lying tangled together in their bed, Lily thought about how far they had both come from that first meeting in Fort Kearny 17 years before. As their children grew older, Lily and Zachary worked to instill in them the values that had sustained their own marriage. They taught James and Catherine, Samuel and Sarah, that true partnership meant listening as much as speaking, compromising without losing yourself, and always keeping your promises even when it was hard. They showed by example that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new every day. James, at 13, was already showing signs of the man he would become. He was responsible and hardworking, with his mother's sharp mind and his father's steady temperament. Catherine, at 11, was wild as a Mustang but loyal to her core. The twins, now 5, were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into trouble together. In the spring of 1891, Lily discovered she was pregnant again at the age of 40. It was unexpected and somewhat daunting, given her age and the fact that her youngest children were already 5 years old. But Zachary was delighted, and Lily found herself excited as well, despite her concerns. "One more child to spoil in my old age," Zachary joked, his hand on Lily's still flat belly. "Our old age," Lily corrected with a laugh. "You are not getting out of the sleepless nights this time just because you are 42. "I would not dream of it," Zachary said. "I have always been there for the sleepless nights." Their youngest child, a boy they named Thomas Michael Owens, was born that November. The delivery was harder than Lily's previous pregnancies, and for a few frightening hours, the midwife was worried about both mother and baby. But Lily was strong, and Thomas was a fighter, and they both came through safely. As Lily held her newborn son, with Zachary sitting beside her on the bed and their older children crowded around to meet their baby brother, she felt a profound sense of completion. This was her family, the life she had been so afraid to build, and it was more wonderful than anything she had imagined. The years after Thomas's birth were full and busy. Lily was tired often, but happy. She watched her older children grow and change, becoming their own people with their own dreams. James talked about studying veterinary medicine, wanting to combine his love of animals with his academic abilities. Catherine wanted to be a rancher like her parents, already showing a natural gift for working with horses and cattle. In 1895, when James was 18 and preparing to leave for university, he sat down with his parents one evening to talk. "I want to thank you both," he said, his voice serious and adult, "for showing me what a real partnership looks like, for teaching me that men and women can work together as equals. That is what I want someday when I find someone to marry." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "That is all we ever wanted for you," she said. To know that you can be strong and still be kind, independent and still be connected to others. You will find your person, Zachary said, clapping his son on the shoulder. And when you do, remember to be patient. The best things are always worth waiting for. James left for university that fall, and the house felt emptier without him. But Catherine stepped up to help more around the ranch, and the twins were old enough now to take on real chores. Thomas, at 4, was a constant source of joy and chaos, keeping everyone entertained with his antics. In 1897, tragedy struck when a harsh winter brought a blizzard that killed many of their cattle. It was a devastating financial blow, the worst they had faced since starting the ranch. Lily and Zachary sat up late into the night, going over the accounts, trying to figure out how they would recover. "We could sell some of the land," Zachary suggested, though Lily could hear the reluctance in his voice. "No," Lily said firmly. "We have worked too hard to build this. We will find another way." "What do you suggest?" Zachary asked. "We diversify," Lily said, her mind already working through possibilities. "We focus more on horse breeding. We rent out some of the grazing land to neighboring ranchers. We tighten our belts and work harder, but we do not give up what we have built." It took 3 years, but they recovered. The horse breeding program Lily had proposed proved to be successful, and by 1900 they were financially stable again. The experience had been frightening, but it had also proven that their partnership could weather even serious storms. That year, James came home from university with his degree and a young woman named Ellen Carr. She was a doctor's daughter from Lincoln, with practical intelligence and a warm smile. James was clearly smitten, and Lily could see why. Ellen treated James as an equal, challenging him intellectually and supporting his dreams. They were married that summer in a ceremony on the ranch, with the whole county turning out to celebrate. Watching her son marry his own partner, Lily felt the circle of her life completing in a beautiful way. She squeezed Zachary's hand during the ceremony, and he looked down at her with the same love in his eyes that had been there when he proposed the 4th time. Catherine, now 21, had taken over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch. She had no interest in marriage, declaring that she was too busy building the horse program to bother with courting. Lily and Zachary supported her choice, knowing that she would find her own path in her own time, just as Lily had. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, were 15 now and inseparable as ever. Samuel wanted to be a teacher, while Sarah dreamed of traveling west to California. Thomas, at 9, was still deciding what he wanted to be when he grew up, changing his mind weekly between cowboy, doctor, and railroad engineer. In the fall of 1901, Lily turned 50. Zachary threw her a party that brought together friends and family from across the region. As she looked around at all the people who had become part of their life, at her children and grandchild, at the thriving ranch they had built together, Lily felt a deep sense of gratitude. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the children were in bed, Zachary led Lily out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. He pulled out a small box and handed it to her. "What is this?" Lily asked, opening it to find a simple gold locket. "Open it," Zachary said. Inside was a tiny photograph of them on their wedding day, young and hopeful, and another photograph taken just recently, older and weathered but still together. "I wanted you to have something that showed the journey we have taken," Zachary said. "From that scared young woman who kept saying no to the confident, beautiful woman you are today." Lily traced the photographs with her finger, her vision blurring with tears. "I love you so much, Zachary, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Zachary said, pulling her close. "And I would wait for you all over again, as many times as it took." They stood there together, watching the familiar Nebraska sunset, comfortable in their love and their life. Lily thought about the girl she had been, so afraid of losing herself that she almost lost everything that mattered. She thought about Zachary's patience, his willingness to wait, his promise to be her partner rather than her master. And she thought about the life they had built, full of love and work and children and challenges overcome together. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Lily said quietly. "Never," Zachary promised. "Not after one no, not after three, not ever." The years continued to flow by like the creek through their property, steady and nourishing. In 1903, Catherine surprised everyone by falling in love with a young horse trainer from Wyoming who came to work at the ranch. His name was Robert Fletcher, and he treated Catherine with the respect and partnership she demanded. They were married in a simple ceremony, choosing to stay on the ranch and continue building the horse program together. In 1905, the twins left home. Samuel went to teachers' college, determined to bring education to the small towns scattered across Nebraska. Sarah, true to her dreams, headed to California with a group of other young people seeking their fortunes in the rapidly growing West. It was hard to let them go, but Lily and Zachary had raised their children to be independent, and they supported their choices. Thomas, now 14, was the only child left at home. He had grown into a serious young man with his father's steady temperament and his mother's sharp intelligence. He spent hours following Zachary around the ranch, learning everything he could about cattle and horses and land management. It was clear he intended to stay on the ranch and eventually take over the family business. In 1908, tragedy struck when Zachary was thrown from a spooked horse and broke his leg badly. He was 61 years old, and the injury did not heal as quickly as it would have in his youth. For months, he was unable to do the physical work that had always been such a big part of his identity. Lily watched her husband struggle with forced inactivity and knew she had to help him find a new purpose. She suggested he start writing down the history of the ranch, all the stories and lessons learned over the years. Reluctantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, Zachary began to write. He documented the early struggles, the triumphs, the mistakes they had made, and the wisdom they had gained. The project gave him something to focus on while his leg healed and created a legacy for their children and grandchildren. By 1909, Zachary was walking again, though with a slight limp that would never completely go away. He was slower than he had been, more careful, but still determined to work the land he loved. Thomas, now 18, took on more and more responsibility, proving himself capable and ready to eventually lead the ranch into the next generation. That summer, the whole family gathered for Zachary and Lily's 34th wedding anniversary. James came with Ellen and their 3 children. Catherine and Robert came from the horse barn where they practically lived. Samuel came from his teaching position in a small town north of Fort Kearny. Even Sarah made the long trip back from California, bringing stories of the ocean and the growing city of San Francisco. As Lily looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the ranch that stretched in all directions, at Zachary sitting beside her with silver in his hair but love still bright in his eyes, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it was all because one stubborn cowboy had refused to give up on her. Because he had asked 4 times and waited patiently for her to find the courage to say yes. During the anniversary celebration, Thomas stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught all of us that real love means being patient, being partners, and never giving up on the people who matter most. May we all be lucky enough to find what you have found together." Everyone raised their glasses and drank, and Lily saw similar sentiments reflected in each of her children's faces. This was their legacy, not just the land and the cattle and the horses, but the example they had set of what a marriage could be. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed or headed back to their own homes, Lily and Zachary sat in their usual spot on the porch. They were both in their late 50s now, with more lines on their faces and more aches in their joints, but still fundamentally the same people who had met in Fort Kearny so many years before. "You ever think about that day I first proposed?" Zachary asked. "Which time?" Lily teased. "The first time," Zachary clarified, "when you looked at me like I had lost my mind for even asking." "I was terrified," Lily admitted, "not of you but of what saying yes would mean. I had convinced myself that marriage meant erasure, that I would disappear into being someone's wife and stop being Lily." "And now?" Zachary asked. "Now I know that I am more Lily than I ever was before," she said, "because you never asked me to be anything other than myself. You kept your promise, Zachary. Every day of our marriage, you have kept your promise to be my partner." "It was not always easy," Zachary said honestly. "There were times when I wanted to just make decisions and move forward without all the discussion and compromise. But then, I would remember how close I came to losing you, and I would remind myself that our partnership was worth any amount of effort." "We have built something good," Lily said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them in the twilight. "Something that will outlast us." "We have," Zachary agreed, "but the ranch is not what I am most proud of." "No." Lily looked at him curiously. "No," Zachary said. "I am most proud of the fact that after 34 years of marriage I still look forward to seeing you every morning. I still want to hear what you think about everything. I still feel lucky that you finally said yes." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am lucky too. Lucky that you were patient enough to wait. Lucky that you asked 4 times instead of giving up after 1 or 2 or 3. They sat there as the stars began to appear, the same stars they had watched countless times over the decades. The Nebraska night was cool and clear, perfect for remembering and dreaming. Somewhere in the house, they could hear Thomas moving around, checking that everything was secure before bed. The next generation, ready to take over when the time came. In 1912, Lily and Zachary began to gradually hand over more control of the ranch to Thomas and Catherine. It was not retirement exactly, but a slow stepping back, giving the next generation room to lead while still being available for advice and support. Thomas proved to be a natural leader, combining his father's skill with cattle and his mother's business acumen. Catherine's horse program had become so successful that she was breeding animals sought after throughout the region. Zachary spent more time on his writing project, expanding it into a full history not just of their ranch but of the region. Local newspapers began publishing excerpts, and other ranchers contributed their own stories. It became a valuable record of a way of life that was already beginning to change as the 20th century brought new technologies and new ways of doing things. Lily took up painting, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for. She painted the ranch at different times of day and year, capturing the landscapes that had become as familiar to her as her own face. She painted her children and grandchildren, preserving their faces and expressions for future generations. In the spring of 1915, Lily and Zachary celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. They were both in their early 60s now, officially old by the standards of the day, though both still active and engaged with life. The family gathered again, even larger now with more grandchildren and Catherine expecting her 3rd child. During the celebration, James pulled his parents aside. "I want to thank you both again," he said. "Ellen and I have been married for 15 years now, and we still use you two as our model. When we disagree, we talk it through like you taught us. When times are hard, we remember that we are partners facing it together. You gave all of us such a gift by showing us what real love looks like. You were always a thoughtful boy, Lily said, hugging her oldest son. And you have become a wonderful man. That night, lying in bed beside Zachary, Lily thought about all the years they had shared. 40 years of marriage, but more than 42 years since they first met. So much life lived, so many challenges faced and overcome, so much love given and received. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, sensing she was still awake. "Everything," Lily said. "Our whole life together. How different it might have been if I had said yes that first time, or if you had given up after the second or third no. But you did not, and I did not, and we ended up exactly where we were meant to be," Zachary said, pulling her close. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had moved to Montana and never come back?" Lily asked. "Not anymore," Zachary said. "I did in those months when I was gone, when your letters were so carefully neutral, and I did not know if you would ever let me in. But once you said yes, once you finally trusted me enough to build a life together, I stopped wondering about other paths. This is the only path I want." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, as comfortable and familiar as breathing after 40 years of sharing a bed and a life. The years that followed brought both joy and sorrow, as all years do. In 1917, Samuel's wife died in childbirth, leaving him with 3 small children to raise alone. Lily and Zachary opened their home to their son and grandchildren, helping him through the worst of his grief and providing stability for the children. Eventually, Samuel met a widow with children of her own, and they married, creating a blended family full of love and second chances. In 1919, Sarah came home from California with a husband and twin daughters, ready to settle back in Nebraska after her years of adventure. She and her husband bought land adjacent to the family ranch, and Sarah threw herself into community work, founding a library and a women's club in Fort Kearny. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's leadership, adapting to new technologies while maintaining the core values Lily and Zachary had established. Automobiles replaced some of the horses, though the family still kept a large herd for working cattle and for Catherine's breeding program. Electricity came to the ranch in 1923, a marvel that made life easier in countless small ways. Through it all, Lily and Zachary remained partners. They moved into a smaller house on the property, leaving the main ranch house to Thomas and his growing family. Their days were quieter now, filled with reading and painting and writing, with visits from children and grandchildren, with the satisfaction of watching the legacy they had built continue to grow and evolve. In the fall of 1925, Lily and Zachary celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. It was a grand celebration, with family coming from across Nebraska and beyond. There were nearly 50 people gathered, all descendants or connected to the family Lily and Zachary had created together. They renewed their vows in a simple ceremony in the same Fort Kearny church where they had married 5 decades before, their hands clasped together and their voices still strong as they promised again to love and honor each other. At the reception, Thomas stood to make a speech. "My parents have shown all of us what it means to truly be partners in life," he said. "They have faced every challenge together, celebrated every triumph together, and built something that will last for generations. But more than that, they have loved each other with a constancy and devotion that has been the foundation of all our lives. We are all here because they found each other, because my father was patient enough to wait, and because my mother was brave enough to finally say yes." Everyone applauded, and Lily saw more than a few people wiping away tears. She looked at Zachary, at his face lined with age but still so dear to her, and she felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. 50 years, she whispered to him. Can you believe it has been 50 years? Best 50 years of my life, Zachary whispered back. And I would wait another 50 if I had to, just to have one more day with you. They danced together that evening, slowly and carefully, because their joints were not what they used to be, but still with joy. The band played old songs they remembered from their youth, and Lily closed her eyes and let herself remember that frightened young woman she had been, so afraid of losing herself. She had not lost herself. Instead, she had found herself, in partnership with this man who had loved her enough to wait. The final years of their life together were gentle ones. They spent their days in comfortable routine, reading to each other, working in their small garden, receiving visitors. Their children and grandchildren came often, bringing news and stories, asking advice, sharing their lives. Lily and Zachary had become the patriarch and matriarch of a large, thriving family, the foundation on which multiple generations had been built. In the spring of 1929, Zachary's health began to fail. He was 72 years old, and his heart was simply wearing out. The doctor said there was nothing to be done, except keep him comfortable and let him rest. Zachary accepted the news with his characteristic calm, more concerned about how Lily would manage without him than about his own impending death. "Promise me you will be all right," he said to her one evening as they sat together in their small house. "Promise me you will not spend whatever time you have left grieving instead of living." "I cannot promise that," Lily said honestly, tears streaming down her face. "Losing you is going to break my heart, Zachary. We have been together for 54 years. I do not know how to be without you." "You are the strongest person I have ever known," Zachary said, holding her hand. "You will find your way. And you will have all our children and grandchildren to support you. You will not be alone." "It will not be the same without you," Lily whispered. "No," Zachary agreed, "but it will still be good. You will make sure it is good because that is who you are." Zachary passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm June night, with Lily beside him and their children gathered in the next room. He was 72 years old, and he died knowing he had lived a full and meaningful life, partnered with the woman he had loved from the moment he first saw her. Lily grieved deeply, as she had known she would. The house felt too empty without Zachary's presence, too quiet without his voice, but she had made him a promise, and she intended to keep it. She threw herself into her painting with renewed energy, creating a series of works depicting their life together that would eventually hang in the Fort Kearny Historical Society. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, passing on the stories and lessons that she and Zachary had learned together. On what would have been their 55th wedding anniversary, Lily sat on the porch of the small house, looking out at the ranch spread before her. Thomas and his family ran it now, with help from Catherine and her grown children. The place was thriving, growing, adapting to the changing times while still holding true to the values Lily and Zachary had established so many years before. Lily thought about that scared young woman standing in the street of Fort Kearny with a rifle in her hands, so determined to protect what was hers that she almost pushed away the best thing that ever happened to her. She thought about Zachary, patient and persistent, asking her 4 times to marry him, waiting through months of separation, proving with his actions that his promises were real. "Thank you for waiting," she whispered to the wind as if Zachary could hear her. "Thank you for asking 4 times. Thank you for loving me enough to be patient with my fear. Thank you for giving me the life I was too scared to reach for on my own." The sun set over the Nebraska plains, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson. Lily sat on her porch and watched, remembering and grateful, her heart still full of love for the cowboy who had waited for her. She wore his grandmother's ring on her finger and carried his love in her heart, and she knew that even though he was gone, they were still partners. They always would be. Lily lived 5 more years, surrounded by family, active and engaged until the very end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1934 at the age of 83, her children found a letter she had written to be read after her death. In it, she told the story of meeting Zachary, of refusing his proposals 3 times, of his patience and her fear and the beautiful life they had built together once she finally found the courage to say yes. "Love," she wrote, "is worth waiting for. It is worth being patient for. It is worth overcoming your fears for. Because when you find real love, the kind that makes you stronger rather than smaller, the kind that challenges you to be your best self rather than demanding you become someone else, that love is the most precious thing in the world. Your father showed me that, and I will be grateful for the rest of eternity that he did not give up after 1 no or 2 or even 3. He asked me 4 times, and on the 4th time, I finally had the wisdom to say yes. It was the best decision I ever made." Lily was buried beside Zachary in the Fort Kearny Cemetery, their headstones side by side, marking the final resting place of 2 people who had loved each other well. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood together at the funeral, a testament to the life they had built and the love they had shared. The ranch continued for generations, always in the family, always carrying forward the values of partnership and patience and persistent love that Lily and Zachary had established. And in the evenings, when the sun set over the Nebraska plains in shades of gold and crimson, you could almost see 2 figures sitting on a porch together, hands clasped, still partners even in eternity, still grateful that one stubborn cowboy had been patient enough to wait, and one frightened woman had finally been brave enough to say yes.